This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, a continuity of business solution for industries that struggle with traditional banking. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. And today I am talking to Ben Walker. He is the COO of ManageMen, which is a kind of like a consulting company in the janitorial industry. Now, the janitorial industry is not something that we think about every day because it's kind of like this invisible industry. But I'm going to bet after talking to Ben, you'll agree with me that if we had to think about it, we wouldn't like it, and it would be very bad if the industry didn't exist. So, Ben, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Rob. I'm doing well. After Thanksgiving, I'm home for the day, and I'm wearing my old man sweater. So I'm doing well.
I need to get myself an old man sweater.
You need to get an old man sweater, yeah, or a Lebowski sweater, yeah.
I need one of those. I've got a young man hoodie because I'm feeling like I need to be younger, not older. I guess, kind of let's just jump right in here. Tell me a little bit about what ManageMen is. Now, it's not management, it's ManageMen.
ManageMen.
What do you guys do?
We are a cleaning industry consultancy based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. ManageMen has three basic services that we do. Number one is consulting. Number two is education. And number three is we participate in and help advance standards development for the custodial industry. The two bigger pieces that we focus on is consulting and education. ManageMen was actually founded off of a grant from the state of Utah in 1985 to develop a staffing formula for state schools to essentially protect the janitorial positions in state schools so they wouldn't get outsourced, number one, and number two, so the schools would always have the right amount of custodial staff to keep the schools clean and healthy. That kind of is what started us on our journey. Now, I was 9 years old in 1985, so I wasn't part of the overall vision then. It was actually started by my father. My father was a bit of a guru in the cleaning industry, if there is such a thing. He worked for his father, who ran a very decent-sized chemical distribution company here in Salt Lake City. They sold cleaning equipment, supplies, machines, consumables, and my dad took that piece as a second generation coming in and decided that he always wanted to be a history professor, and at the time that he was finishing up college, there were only two positions nationwide for history professors at the college level. And so he decided to apply that desire to the industry that he was working in and became an educator in the industry.
That's very cool.
It's interesting, and it was he did a lot to basically develop a standardized prescriptive cleaning approach for an industry that is predicated on chaos.
So, yeah, I think it'd be chaos if we didn't have janitors, but just for those that are the uninitiated and don't really know much about it, how big is the janitorial industry, the cleaning industry?
It's big. So just in the United States alone, there's about 2.5 million janitors.
Wow.
That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's a fairly rough estimate, and I am rounding on that one. It's an invisible industry. It's a $200 billion industry. The thing that I always tell people is I've seen estimates as low as 100 billion, and I've seen them as high as 300 billion. And so I tend to err on the side of the middle road and just say it's a $200 billion industry. The thing that's interesting about that is that 90% of that $2 billion is all labor. It's all spent on labor. It's all spent on making sure on wages, on insurance, on injury prevention, on injury compensation, and only 10% of that $200 billion spend is estimated to be equipment, chemicals, consumables like paper products, machines, tools, and equipment.
So you use the word invisible. What do you mean by that? That the industry is invisible?
It's invisible. So custodians are invisible in most facilities. They're treated invisibly by the people that are inside of the buildings most of the time. It is treated like a second-class profession in the United States, especially.
Right, they're just janitors,
They're just janitors. They're stupid janitors. They don't speak English. We can say or do anything around them. They're not here. The good, and it's okay in mass media and pop culture to malign the demographic. If you, it's what is it? I have a friend that's a really good writer in the industry, and she calls it occupational marginalization. It's one of the only professions in this country that's just it's people seem to accept and allow the occupation to be marginalized. So what we end up having is things like, if you ever watch the TV show Scrubs, or if you ever watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or you can even go back further and look at like Good Times or All in the Family. You have these crazy, dumb quote unquote janitors who are mistreated in the show. They don't have much to add to the plot other than they're there for laughs and gags. The one from Scrubs is my favorite. They didn't even give him a name until the last episode, and they called him Janitor the whole time and abused him. Now he abused back, but there was one episode in particular that really caught me, and it was about the second or third season, where the main character is John Dorian, JD. He dusts up with the hospital janitor, and JD has had enough with them, and he says, at least what I do matters. Yesterday when I walked by you, you were mopping this spot, and today when I walk by you, you're going to mop the same spot, and you're going to do the same thing for the rest of your life, and it doesn't matter. And the professional cleaning industry just kind of took it. They always kind of take it. Because they don't value the people that do the work. They, like I said, 90% of that is labor. The other 10% is supplies, materials, equipment, and chemicals.
Well, it's like garbage men, right? Garbage men are just there's jokes about you could be a sanitation engineer, and if you think about it though, if people weren't picking up the garbage and people weren't mopping those hospital floors, the world would be a very dangerous place from a health perspective.
From a health perspective, absolutely. I mean, the thing that people don't understand is when the ancient Romans figured out how to move waste out of their urban centers and where they were living, quality of life and life expectancy went up by 20 years. I mean, it wasn't too uncommon to only expect to live about 35 years back then. And when they figured out how to start moving the human waste, garbage, bodily waste, those types of things out of the living center, magically the quality of life went up and life expectancy increased. And we've been on that trend ever since. And the thing that we do in the United States, especially now with cleaning, is everybody has like this magic pill treatment that they want to figure out. I don't want to do the work. I want this wonder goo or this miracle machine to do it for me. And most of that stuff is good. I mean, don't get me wrong, but the problem with that is everybody thinks they know how to clean. Everybody thinks they understand why cleaning is important. Most people don't. And most people just don't. If they did, you wouldn't have people with filthy houses. You wouldn't go into you wouldn't go into corporate working environments. and have people with, occupational hoarding, odor problems, anywhere in a public facility you go. There's 9 times out of 10, you're going to encounter either a malodor that's coming from the restroom or the hallway. You're going to encounter occupational hoarding, and it's not the fault of the custodian, it's the fault of the organization because they don't value clean. So
What's occupational hoarding? I've never heard that term.
Occupational hoarding. Have you ever gone to I know you get in buildings a lot to do consulting work and things like that. Have you ever walked by someone's cubicle that has a very bodacious Pez collection, or they're fans of the New York Giants and they have everything in their cubicle dedicated to the New York Giants?
Oh yes. When I was a corporate guy, I saw that a lot.
And it's good. Everybody wants to kind of personalize their working environment, but you think of the amount of time that's put in to cultivating that personal working space. And there's a lot of good science and psychology on basically people will do that or tend to do that in environments that are disheveled because they get these physiological cues that the building isn't clean and they need to make themselves more comfortable in those settings, and so they'll do things like that to kind of preserve their own space.
So it's like a weird psychological tick or something they're trying to deal with.
Absolutely, it goes back to the graffiti studies back in the 60s and 70s. There's a famous psychologist. I can't remember what his name is right now off the top of my head, but I'll after we're done here, I'll send it over to you so you can reference it. That parked a fancy car in one of the worst neighborhoods in New York and left it there overnight just to see what would happen. And parked it, locked it, left it alone, and nothing happened overnight. The next night, he came back and knocked one of the windows out. And within 24 hours, that car was completely stripped down, completely gutted, and people had come in and knocked more windows out, taken parts off, put it up on blocks, removed tires, and it's just people get these physical and visual cues. If something is dirty, it's going to get dirtier. If things are clean environments, people tend to put a lot of effort in keeping them that way.
That sounds like broken windows theory.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's the research that was done. It's the broken windows theory. I can't remember the psychologist's name. I interviewed him for an article I did about 15 years ago, and he was a fascinating mind. And I was told afterwards that it was amazing that I even got an interview with him. But he basically said people get these visual cues, and they're subtle. And so those are visual. The thing that happens now in a lot of public facilities, the first thing you notice is when you go into a restroom at like a major airport. What's the first thing you notice?
The garbage can overflowing.
Garbage can overflowing. Malodors. Malodors lingering. That's a big one that I see a lot in public facilities, especially schools. We'll see a lot of that in schools where there will be fecal and urine type odors that are permeating. We did a remediation of a cleaning program, and in a middle school, and we could smell the urine and feces outside of the building.
Ew.
And it's I'm fun at parties.
I'm sure you are.
But what happens with that is you have people that you have people who are trying to keep a school clean. They're trying their best to do a good job. They have had this, it's usually either a time expectation or an appearance expectation on getting something done, getting it done right, and getting it done quickly. And all three of those things put together have just created this outcome that is poor. What happens when you have a malodor in a building? Most of the time means that somebody hasn't been switching out the solution in their mop buckets. And so
they're re-cleaning with like funky water or something?
Well, they're not re-cleaning, they're polluting with funky water. They're essentially what'll happen, and this isn't, and I'm not knocking the custodian. No one's shown them that this not to do this. And you know, in most situations in any working environment, you're going to you know, you're not going to do something unless somebody has shown you how to do it properly.
Right.
And so what you end up having is you'll have a cleaning worker go in with a mop bucket full of solution in the restroom, especially mop the restroom floor, not change the solution out. So essentially in that mop bucket that's in front of them, they have a bucket full of fecal matter and urine, maybe blood, maybe, you know, in a high school, certainly you might have semen or other kinds of things in there.
What?
And yeah,
I don't want to know this.
well, this is,
put a warning label on this, not to, you know, listen to this, you know, during lunch.
well, now you think about that. Now, what happens when you go into a restaurant and you have those malodors? That means that those buckets have been basically used to not only mop one restroom, but mop the other, maybe mopping the hallways and walkways. And so what you end up having is you have these very profound malodors a lot of times, and that's how they perpetuate. And the whole thing is you have these single chamber mop buckets that fill up to 4 to 8 gallons worth of water. Nobody wants to change them out because it's time consuming to take.
Heavy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's heavy, and you know, and you have these big Kentucky style spaghetti string mops that are basically like in, you know, massive swabs. Some, you know, some of those mops can hold up to a gallon of water just on their own, or solution on their own. And so you have basically a swab that's filled, you know, with a gallon of cleaning solution, water, fecal matter, urine, blood, semen, anything else that's going to happen in a restroom, right? And you're taking that and you're not only picking it up off the floor and putting it back down, but you're putting it back down incrementally larger amounts over the facility.
So you're just spreading it around, right? Just spreading the love.
Spreading the love. Now,
so
that's
how do you fix that? Like,
well,
you know, what is your solution to fixing this problem?
Well, there's several solutions, and you know, there's number one is you reduce the amount of instructions that are complicated that are being given to the custodians. That's number one. Most of the time, custodians in most facilities are tasked with not only being professional firefighters, but they're also tasked with making the building look spick and span, clean, appearance-based clean. And number three, they're also in charge of either being some sort of a customer service function or being some sort of, a lot of people actually abuse the customer service function. People think that custodial and cleaning type workers are essentially maids. And so you'll do honeydews. And the way we approach that is, number one, we remove old-fashioned tools and put in light ones, easy to understand ones, and we simplify the amount of chemistry. And
so let me back up. So what you would do is, like, ManageMen is a consulting company. If I have a facility that is experiencing these funky mail orders or improper cleaning, you will advise that facility on how they can improve that, whether they're a school or a restaurant. And so that's what you're kind of talking about is.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But the thing that we would probably do first is we cover this in a week-long course that we teach called Janitor University. I would love to be out in everybody's building, sniffing closets and restrooms and figuring out, you know, what's going on there. But a lot of times, and it's a lot easier for us to actually bring people to us and teach them what's causing what's causing, 90 to, well, not even 90, what's causing all their complaints. And it's usually, it's usually a chain of events that we've been discussing. Number one, there's no training or education that's specific to the outcome that the individual organization wants. Number two is there's no standardized program that's in place, meaning in one building you'll have a different set of chemicals, a different set of tools, a different set of machines, and it's all based on either what the head custodian in that building likes, or people have actually had to, and this is very common, people actually have to fight with other shifts and other buildings to get the stuff that they want. And so you'll have this very protective hodgepodge, or this very big hodgepodge of tools and equipment that people are very protective of. And so what we'll do is we'll bring people in and we'll take them through, like, look, this is what's leading to this. We'll give them a prescription. We'll teach them how to simplify their daily cleaning operations. So it's based on frequencies, which are daily tasks, weekly tasks, and then most of the time when we capture that, we can move into the project tasks, which are taking up a lot of the time. Now, to fix the specific problem of malodors, the first thing we do is get rid of the old yellow style buckets that fill up with 8 gallons of fluid, and move them to what's really popular. It's been popular in Europe for about 20 years now. It's just now starting to catch on here in the United States, but 2-chamber buckets that are small with a microfiber mop head. There are a lot of deep clean machines. There's auto scrubbers and things like that, but for restrooms especially, it's hard to get those in and out. And so we tend to err on the side of minimalism before we bring in the big Gatling guns to combat the problem. And so, so that's one. You're going to move less water through the facility. You're going to put down an exact amount. You're going to have a dirty side and a clean side. Microfiber tends to release, a lot of the bad news stuff when it's agitated in water. And so what you'll end up seeing, and I can give you pictures of this, is you'll
I don't know if I want to see a picture of this.
You want to see pictures of this because it'll make you feel a lot better when you see one in a facility. Is that you'll see the dirty side get progressively darker to the point where it almost looks ink, like inky. And then you'll see the clean side go down and the water will stay clear, and it'll stay clear, and it'll stay clear, and it'll stay clear. Now that's not, you're not going to completely remediate that in a day. It takes, months and months and years of abuse of the facility for that stuff to accumulate. And so we have fairly good data that, within 6 weeks to 6 months, you'll start to notice a much cleaner result if you just run that process every single day. And
so it sounds like you have like a prescriptive system of sorts, or something, right? So if I'm a building owner, you could just come in and say you have all sorts of guidance on how to do like everything, or what do you call this, and what is this?
Oh yeah, so we call it the prescriptive process that we have developed is called OS1. It's based on best practices, engineering, scientific results, and professionalism. So we take a 3-pronged approach to it, and we achieve the results that way. Number one is we give people an engineered approach to the way that they set up their facilities. You're going to logistically set up your building to be clean. Most buildings aren't logistically set up to be clean. There'll usually be a huge closet, or not that huge of a closet, but a closet nonetheless on each floor. It'll be jam-packed with stuff that people may or may not be using, stuff that's been in there for 20 years, or stuff that you've inherited from the previous 2 or 3 contractors that were.
Sounds like you've been to my house.
Yeah, it is. It's occupational hoarding, right? But that's what it is. And so if your house looks like that, we might need to do a hoarding remediation of your place over a couple of beers or something. But
probably
but no. And so what we'll do is we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at, most of the time, there's a number that a lot of facility owners use called cleanable square footage. Now, I don't want to get into too much of a math lesson, but most of the time when we go in to take a look at what the cleanable square footage is based off of this process that we teach, we, number one, find that their cleanable square footage is way off, and usually it's grossly overestimated. Is either way off, either doesn't exist and has never existed, or it's been ignored and the building has been staffed arbitrarily. And that's usually what we find. And so we come in and go ahead.
So it sounds like, so you got this prescriptive methodology, and you go in and you analyze the space, you figure out, what the equipment they should be using, what kind of training. So you kind of identify the problems that a lot of facilities have, and then you make recommendations on how to improve. it sounds like consultants, they always, charge a fortune, but it sounds real expensive. But what are the as a facility manager, I mean, I got to think about my bottom line and I got to keep costs down. It sounds like this OS1 system might be real expensive to implement. I mean, how do I justify that to, the boss, the people, the being owners?
It depends on what you call expensive. You might spend in a large organization like a large university might spend between $35,000 to $85,000 on consulting fees with us, just setting something up over a transition period of 18 months. But the thing is most of our best success stories usually see between a 25 to 30% return on investment within an 18-month period.
Wow.
At worst, we've been told at worst it's a cost-neutral program. But the thing that we aren't thinking about is what we do when we initially come in. Here's a dirty little secret of the cleaning industry.
You said dirty secret.
Yeah, it's a dirty little secret. I know I'm very punny these days. But one of the cleaning industry's dirty little secrets is that OSHA inspectors are trained in the event of an accident that prompts an OSHA inspection. OSHA inspectors are trained to go straight to the custodial department because they know that that's where they're going to find the most infractions on HAZCOM law. Now, to the layperson out there whose eyes tend to glaze over when you talk about safety regulations, what that means is essentially money. And it's a lot of money. And a single bottle that is mislabeled, that you can't identify what the chemical is in it, and that doesn't have an SDS for that particular chemical, just one single bottle where you find something like that is going to run about $36,000 in fines alone.
Wow.
That's a single bottle. Now you think of how many dozens of bottles you see on shelves in custodial closets that are different colors, different labels, handwritten labels, things like that. Those are all those are all HAZCOM violations. And so, one of the things we do when we come in initially is we do a risk assessment on what your potential for HAZCOM law is. And I don't think I've ever done one professionally where we didn't find under $500,000 in fines.
So you guys just don't come in and say, okay, give me Mr. Janitor. This is a new fancy mop and this is how you mop. You're doing a lot more than just, as far as your evaluation. This affects other bottom lines. Like this is like, the safety department stuff now starts getting involved with that. Like if OSHA violation, things like that. So that's kind of interesting. Like, where this could, help out with like a lot of big facilities. So is this just kind of like a niche thing, or, I mean, what kind of people, what kind of customers do you have? Is there anybody I would recognize that uses this kind of OS1 system?
Most of our customers are large organizations. I mean, the biggest project we ever did was working with the United States Postal Service.
Small organization.
Small organization, right? They had lost every arbitration with their labor union since 1975, I think. And these weren't small arbitrations. These were $50 million worth of arbitration that the Postal Service would have to give back to its labor force.
Right.
The problem is back in the mid 70s, I want to say. I'm forgetting when the exact date was, but it was mid 70s-ish. The APWU, which is a very, very big labor union that represents all postal employees, successfully negotiated an old spec called the MS-47 into the Postal Service's management agreement. Problem with that is most of it had outdated stuff by 1982. They were still calling out things like waxing floors. Floor wax doesn't exist anymore, essentially. I mean, people don't wax floors anymore. Shampooing carpets, people don't shampoo carpets anymore. And it had just a litany of redundant tasks. What they did, and it was a good attempt. If I was going through a large facility and trying to make a spec, it would be tedious. But the thing that they did is they took individual building inventory for each room and loaded it up with tasks. The problem with that is you end up with nationwide in a spec that you're supposed to manage as the U.S. Postal Service. You end up with 6,000 cleaning tasks. I mean, 6,000 cleaning tasks of, okay, the spec says I should dust this once a day, I should spray this once a day, I should vacuum this once a day, and you end up with just an unmanageable spec. And so we were brought in essentially to rework the spec. And that was the first part. The second part is they had so many redundant specs. We ended up with 6,200, I think, at the conclusion of our initial assessment, and we worked to reduce that down to under 99.
So in terms of like dollars saved and things like that, what was what kind of success story did they have implementing OS1?
Just in implementing OS1, they ended up. So what they basically did is they completely redid their purchasing program. How to say this diplomatically? Their vendors for cleaning materials had figured out how to basically come in with a barcode reader and just scan a barcode every couple of weeks and refill their chemical inventory. So what we found and equipment inventory, what we found in just about every postal service was these just massive underground warehouses of stuff that they had been sold that they didn't need. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars worth of equipment. What they did is they either surplused it, or sold it, or gave it back to the distributors. And what we did is we simplified their chemical inventory. So instead of having, I think on average, each facility had about 60 different chemicals that we found. We got that down to 12. So we simplified their chemical inventory. We spent a good amount of time educating the custodial workforce on how we wanted them to do things in this program. And then we standardized the equipment network-wide. The last presentation that the U.S. Postal Service gave us, and this was in 2017 in Memphis, was that they, by their conservative estimates, had saved $300 million
Wow.
in their $1.5 billion custodial operation.
That's insane.
Some of that was labor savings. Now, they didn't reduce headcount. They just they were able to reallocate labor to other projects and other areas of things that had just had to fall by the wayside because they didn't have, because they were being held to the spec, they didn't have time to go and do some of these like long-term projects. So they reallocated that, but I know a good chunk of that, I think, I want to say it was about $100 million of that was just in savings alone on stuff that they had been sold that they didn't need. And
so that's a pretty crazy, return on investment in terms of this, just implementing a system. But it sounds like you're doing a lot of stuff. You're educating you're training a workforce. You're doing inventory reallocation and refinement and management, and it sounds like you're developing a lot of process changes along with all this to make all this happen.
Absolutely. In fact, what we usually are doing in terms of process changes is we're taking, most custodial operations have hundreds of them that are completely unreasonable, tough to follow, and we simplify that down to under a dozen. Under a dozen that they have to worry about annually, only about 4 they have to worry about daily.
Wow. So it actually sounds like it's actually a lot easier than
It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier than what they're doing. Most of the time, the way we do it is, we're bringing in new technology that is a little bit more expensive up front, but but we also teach people how to maintain it, so it lasts a lot longer. We have, there's a couple of really good companies that we work with that have been very patient with us as we develop processes, and have actually started developing equipment to fit in this process. One of them is Protein, which is owned by Emerson Electric. They're a vacuum company. They didn't invent the backpack vacuum, but they put it on the map. And they're the ones, they're just a vacuum company. That's what they did. The other one is Portion Pack, which is a very small little chemical company out of Chicago. They started up in about 1956, 57, I want to say, and they were the first environmentally conscious chemical company in the cleaning industry. They've been around for years. They've had to follow all kinds of new updates, greening of the industry, EPA stuff, and they have done so without having to change their formulations much, if at all. The other one is Unger, which is a company out of Europe, which basically develops ergonomic tools. Ergonomic tools for window washing, ergonomic tools for mopping, ergonomic tools that basically take the strain off the body. People don't understand that custodial is ridiculously tough work.
I worked, doing a lot of stuff like that when I was younger. Yeah, it's very physical.
It's physical, right? And it's tiring. And that's the thing. It's just like this perfect storm in the custodial industry. Everybody thinks they know cleaning. And then you get all these people outside that think they understand how to manage cleaning. And it's just like this perfect storm. I mean, people buy these old tools because they think they're going to get budgets cut. And so they end up with heavy equipment that they don't want to replace, that's broken, and equipment ultimately that is injuring them. I mean, nobody talks about that. Custodial departments, and this is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, are among the most injured demographic in the workforce today.
Workers' comp claims, that kind of thing.
Workers' comp claims, yeah, absolutely. Custodial departments rack up. I think it's the third biggest spend in the United States. I might be off on that. It might be fifth. But it's between the third and the fifth biggest spend on days away from work due to injury.
So your OS1 system is what you're saying is can actually reduce like workers' comp claims?
Yeah, it has.
Well?
Actually. Yeah, absolutely it has. If you execute it properly, it has. One of our biggest success stories in the world is a top secret government weapons lab down in New Mexico called San Diego.
Weapons labs?
Yeah, it's a weapons lab.
Okay.
They blow stuff up.
Fun.
Yeah, it's fun to go down there. They blow stuff up. They invent a lot of technology. They're under the Department of Energy oversight. Sandia National Labs. They invented the silicon chip there. They do all kinds of crazy stuff. And this is all unclassified, by the way, so I can't talk about it. But they do all kinds of stuff with nanotechnology. If you have LASIK, the basic concepts of LASIK lenses for your eyes was developed at Sandia National Labs.
I didn't know that. Thank them.
Yeah,
I'm back in classes now, but I had LASIK a long time ago.
They developed the technology there, but yeah, they came to us. The whole reason we ended up working with them in the first place was they came to us because their workers went out on strike, and the managers had to suddenly do all the cleaning of the facility. Well,
yeah,
it didn't go over well. Hey, we ended up with their management team in a whole class of JU, I think in about 2000 or 2001. But they're at Sandia, they will tell you they are in the safety business. I mean, they work with nuclear materials, they work with lasers, they work with all kinds they work with God knows what else. And
classified.
So safety, it's classified. And so, but safety is very big for them. And so one of the things that they did as a cost-benefit analysis after implementing OS1 was they took a look at what their workers' compensation payouts were. And they found that the year before they went on OS1, they had something like 187 days lost due to injury that they had to pay out in workers' compensation claims. The year after they installed OS1, it went down to about 40. The year after that, it went down to 8. And the year after that, it went to 0, and it stayed there for a couple of years. Now we're talking 0 injuries to the custodial staff in a year's time, and it was in a fairly rapid, it was a fairly rapid accomplishment. And they estimated that they spent the equivalent of the custodial budget, which is about $2 million. They estimated that their safety department spent about that in just workers' compensation claims before they put the OS1 program into place.
That's huge. You mentioned, about before you do a lot of training and you're really innovative in that space. So are you doing any online kind of training, or is this just in-person training? Tell me a little bit about that.
We are expanding into online. We actually just launched JanitorUniversity.com late last year, actually. And our 4 basic specialist courses are up right now on it. We are expanding that out into management courses that you can take online and learn at your own pace. The specialist certification courses are geared towards the individual custodian. So if you want to get trained on the 4 functions of cleaning, which are light duty, vacuum, restroom, and utility, you can actually, for a very low price, go in and take those courses at your own pace. It's a certification module, so once you finish the course, you can get a certification, and then you can re-up those certifications every year, and you get prompted to do so. We're also launching a really big initiative in the next 3 months, which is a chemical handlers course. Similar to a food handlers course, it's a chemical handlers course for custodians to take and get a chemical handler certificate, very similar to food handlers. What people don't realize is a lot of times there are accidents almost weekly. You can look anywhere you want where people have mishaps with custodial cleaning chemicals, and it's typically the result of a cleaning worker mismixing chemicals in an environment, or misusing a chemical in an environment because they haven't been taught how to properly use it. So just here in Salt Lake, 4 or 5 years ago, Temple Square actually got evacuated because a custodian had put bowl cleaner, which is about 8% hydrochloric acid, and bleach, which is which is I think he was trying to make a better bowl cleaner, and what he didn't realize is he actually had just put the ingredients together in the toilet bowl to make a very potent toxic chlorine gas. Evacuated a building. Sent about a dozen people to the hospital, evacuated Temple Square, and a cloud of chlorine gas kind of hovered over City Creek for about 24 hours after that. That's small compared to some of the things that we have seen. I mean, there was another incident here in Salt Lake about 5 years ago where there was some mislabeling and some misunderstanding of what a drain opener was, and it ended up in the iced tea mixture at a barbecue joint. And a lady thought she was pouring her glass full of sweet tea, but she was really pouring drain opener and iced tea into her cup. You can see the video on Google. She drank it, ended up getting severely injured in her throat, almost died, went to the hospital, spent about 6 weeks there, permanently damaged her vocal cords. And last I heard, there was a class action lawsuit between the franchise, the manufacturer of the chemical, and the distributor of the chemical for improper labeling and education. And so what we're trying to do is not only mitigate that risk for the cleaning worker, but also to mitigate that risk for the public, and to give chemical manufacturers and distributors some due diligence education that if they go through this set prescription or this set prescribed course with individual workers who are going to be working with the chemicals, they've got good legal ground to fall back on in the event of an accident.
So what it comes down to is training is kind of important. That's like amazing.
Kind of important.
So Ben, I appreciate you coming on the show today. I mean, you're right. It's stuff I've never thought about janitors, but it's amazing all that stuff's out there. Where can people find out more about what you do and the education for the janitor world?
Sure, absolutely. They're more than welcome to check us out online, www.managemen, that's MANAGEMEN.com, or go to JanitorUniversity.com to look at our online options. Or you can also find me on cleanling.com. I am the standing columnist for Facility Cleaning Decisions magazine, and that's out every month, and you can read about the things that I'm ranting about every month in that magazine.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thank you, Rob. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.